I'm joined now by a baseball author and an Evansville former native, now lives up in Indianapolis, Kevin Wirthwein, who wrote this first book here about 4 years ago or so, Baseball in Evansville, Booms, Busts, and One Global Disaster. You've got a new book now that came out about a month ago called Blackball in Evansville, Diamonds in the Shadows. Talks about the integration of the Negro League stats as well as into the Major League Baseball, as well as, you know, the black history in baseball in Evansville.
Yes.
Welcome back here into the WEHT and TVW.
Oh, it's great to be back.
So tell us about this new book. How did it kind of come to fruition for you?
I finished my first book, and I touched on some of the professional Negro teams, black teams that played in Evansville. There are a couple of significant kind of Negro League, minor league teams, but there were 7 or 8 pages maybe. Sure. And out of 190 or whatever it was, and when I finished, I know there's more. And I only had those teams because I concentrated on professionals. So I said, well, I got to find out what was going on throughout baseball in Evansville on the African American side. So I started researching it. And I started seeing small articles around the 1900, right in then. And some in the 1800s, just casual. A black team had a cake sale or something, sure, yeah, but nothing on the games. But right around 1900, small little articles popped up. Not nearly the kind that a white baseball team would get, Major League Baseball.
Right.
So I dove in, and I started doing it chronologically, starting around 1900, and followed it through till really the death of the Negro Leagues, which was right around 1960.
Yeah, you really get down a rabbit hole when you start to find those things. You
have no idea.
Yeah, exactly. Part of us in sports, when we find something that we want to, look into, to talk about, to know more about, we go down this rabbit hole, and it probably was an experience for you.
Yeah, well, I'm bad at that, or good at it, depending on
whichever way you want to look at it.
Everything was a rabbit hole on this book, because everything I found was new to me, and it will be new to people who read the new book. So it was so interesting going down these rabbit holes. Now I had to come back to the story, but because you could encompass the times that, what was going on at the time in the world when this was going on, things like that. And you start veering around. And, but yeah, wonderful rabbit holes.
So if you haven't seen the first interview with Kevin that Brad Bird did a number of years ago, about 4 years ago, right? It was right before the pandemic.
4 years ago, about a week before they shut everything down,
right,
including bookstores.
Exactly, right? So if you haven't seen that first interview, hit pause, go watch it. It's on our website, tristatehomepage.com. Come on back so that you know about the first book. You can go out and maybe read the first book, and then before we get to the second book here, the new one, Blackball in Evansville. So there's a rich history of baseball in Evansville, as we know, but I guess many people, including yourself originally, didn't know how rich of a history black baseball players had in Evansville. Walk us through kind of what you found.
Well, there's specific parts of the book. One of my favorite is chronicling born and bred Evansville players that went on to some fame in the Negro Leagues, the now Major Leagues. Mm-hmm. And some of the stories are super interesting. There's a couple of tragic stories, early deaths. We had a particular pitcher who at one time was, before Satchel Paige came along, he was considered the best black pitcher in all of baseball. He pitched in the Negro Leagues. He kind of flamed out early, but when he was young, he was just unhittable. And so I found seven players that I went into great detail on. And I think it's interesting as heck. Then I started out, I guess, I flipped to that. I started out just trying to find teams that played and were reported on, which is, there may be some that I never found that played, so I found numerous teams, good teams that would travel in the early days, barnstorming teams, which barnstorming, which is literally going anywhere to play anyone to get gate receipts so you could travel to the next game.
Maybe not the most lavish of lives out there.
Not the most lavish.
They did it. That's how they kind of got from place to place and got exposure.
Yeah, a lot of time on the road in cars, buses, trains. But they endured. And the result is Jackie Robinson and the rest. Then I talked a little bit about players who came through Evansville, either played here for an Evansville team while they were still breaking color barriers in the white minor leagues, which was a lot slower than the white major leagues, who went through Evansville, played here, and then went on to do some historic things in breaking color barriers, especially in the South. And I talk about the myriad of Negro League teams who came here to play games. In Bosse Field, there was a World Championship Series played in 1917, right after, a couple of years after Bosse Field opened, that featured, they called it the Championship of the World. Had great Hall of Famers who eventually went into the Baseball Hall of Fame. And on and on and on through 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, teams came to play at Bosse Field. Negro League teams, it was still a show place.
Yeah. Well, why is it important that now the deep, rich history that was the Negro Leagues and the leagues that weren't always, I guess you can say, recognized, why is it important that they're being brought to light today, and that this book kind of brings that same type of purpose?
I think it's because it's long overdue, and they always should have been there, and they labored in obscurity, although their counterparts in white major leagues, guys like Babe Ruth and you name it, knew they existed and knew they were great. But there was, kind of a minor conspiracy to keep blacks out of baseball. At the highest level, even the baseball commissioner, publishers, like publisher of the Sporting News, they conspired to keep them down and out until a one-time resident of Evansville became the commissioner of baseball when Kennesaw Mountain Landis died. Yeah. He said, "This is over." And he said, we can integrate. And it was Happy Chandler, who lived out on Old Newburgh Road for a year. So we even have a connection there, which is kind of cool.
That's a really cool connection, the fact that in Evansville, we can connect to breaking the color barrier in baseball.
And shortly after he took office from Landis, Branch Rickey signed Jackie Robinson. I mean, within less than a year.
It's funny.
Happy Chandler saying it's okay now was the first person to do that, and then it happened. So we should be proud of that.
Yeah,
he wasn't a long-time resident, but he lived here when he was a youth.
Yeah, exactly. There's so much that this book will probably teach the people that they didn't know, but there was so much, even as kids, if you're a kid reading it, or a kid experiencing baseball kind of for the first time, there's still so much out there that you kind of don't know. You were able to experience baseball for the first time through your grandfather. You call him Papa Bear, right?
Correct.
And he was able to give you kind of that first look, right? Like once you got hooked on it, you couldn't get unhooked. Are you going to be able to, through this book, give that same sense of help to the people reading it? Through either of these books, really, that you can teach them the history more to kind of have them love it.
That was my goal. I hope so. I think I can. I have a story in my new book about Papa Bear, my grandfather, about one of my first times going to the ballpark. How after that first time, I was going forever. It was such an experience. Having never seen live professional baseball under the lights, it was the ball was so bright, the uniforms were so clean. It was just so, I was addicted.
Yeah. So you have a brother, Chris, who's a baseball historian. And so
he's more of a golf historian, actually.
Historian. Okay, sure. He's out on the links more.
He's written a couple books on the history of Crooked Stick Golf Course, a Pete Dye course in Indianapolis, where they've had major championships. He's got 2 books. He's the historian at Crooked Stick. I'm the baseball guy.
Sure, yeah.
He knows baseball.
He knows baseball.
He had a better baseball card collection than me.
Okay, well,
I'll give him that.
Well, then maybe he is the baseball historian with the baseball card. But both of you, historians in your own way, kind of telling the stories. How proud do you think your Papa Bear, your grandfather, would have been of you guys to continue this tradition?
I just got chills when you said that. It would have meant everything to him. And my mother died shortly before my first book came out, but I let her read a lot of what I was writing, so she knew I was working on it. No, but I know he would just be beside himself, and with pride.
So what's next for you after this book?
Oh, geez.
Obviously people are going to go out and read this book now, but what's next for you?
Michael, writing books is hard. I don't know what's next. I have so many ideas. Probably something, and I'm an Evansville historian. It'll be about Evansville. May not be baseball, maybe basketball, maybe something else. But in the meantime, I've got a blog that I started. So if I find things that didn't make the book, because we're still uncovering stuff. I mean, this is a work in progress, especially for the Negro League statistics and things like that. I'm going to post it on my blog, which is a work in progress too. It's called Baseball. This is a really hard one. BaseballInEvansville.com.
I might have to write that down.
Write it down. That's also, if they want to buy either of these books, I have links to the publishers and to Amazon and such. But I've got some interesting stories out there already. I'll have more. Awesome. Because there's no way I could have uncovered everything.
Well, we will look forward to more books as well as reading this new book and even rereading both of them, because who doesn't love the history of sports, especially baseball, here in Evansville. Kevin, thank you for joining me.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.